Hey Team Bio, welcome to your screencast on the cell cycle. So our next unit is going to be talking about how cells reproduce. And so we're moving from our unit on metabolism, which was photosynthesis and cellular respiration. And now we're going to be talking about how cells grow and divide. So you all are beautiful multicellular organisms, and an interesting question is how did that happen? You started out as, well, two cells really, an egg and a sperm, which fused and became one cell, and now you're billions of cells. So how did you go from being one cell to being billions of cells? And the answer is your cells grew and divided, and they underwent something called the cell cycle. So the cell cycle is composed of kind of two phases which have subphases within themselves. So we're going to actually start with the innermost two colors here, and these two phases of the cell cycle are called interphase and mitosis and cytokinesis. This is the wrong blue. Okay, so interphase, as you can see from this image here, I've divided the interior and the exterior of the circle up into two different rings. Interphase is actually composed of three different phases. That's indicated here by the red circle or the red arrow, the purple arrow, and then another red arrow. And most of the cell cycle, the cell is in interphase. Mitosis and cytokinesis are actually when the cell is going to divide, and it's actually just a very short period of time when the cell is in this phase. Cell division, the dividing up of the genetic material, and then the division of the organelles and the cell itself is actually very quick in the overall life of the cell. So cells spend most of their time in interphase. And so let's imagine we start with one single cell here. And we're starting out in the first phase within interphase, and this is called the G1 phase. Now, G1, depending on who you're talking to, some people say it stands for gap phase, and some people say it stands for growth phase. So I would accept either as correct. During the G1 phase, the cell is doing kind of normal cell life stuff. Whoops. Normal cell. Whoops, not life with a Y-L-I. Life things. And within that list of normal cell life stuff, we would find cell respiration, if it's a plant or another photosynthetic organism, it would be doing photosynthesis. It's going to be doing protein synthesis. Remember, we talked about transcription and translation, and then the secretion of proteins. So that's all happening during normal cell life. It's going to be doing, so I guess cellular respiration and photosynthesis fall under metabolism. Membrane transport. All the things that we've talked about thus far this year are going to be happening during the G1 phase. And all at the same time that this normal cell life stuff is happening, the cell is going to be growing in size. And as you recall, as a cell grows in size, so as the size increases, the surface area to volume ratio is going to decrease. And so this is going to be ultimately a problem for the cell. The cell is going to have to divide at some point, but right now it's not a problem. We're still small enough that the surface area to volume ratio is still compatible with being alive. Okay, but by the end of the G1 phase, our cell, which was this big to start out with, is now a little bit bigger. And it enters the second part of interphase, which is called the S phase. Man, all these colors are different than the ones that I chose. Okay, S phase. S phase. During S phase, the cell is still growing in size. So this note that you have here, you can draw an arrow here because this is happening as well in S phase. But the S in S phase stands for synthesis. And the thing that's being synthesized in S phase is the DNA. We undergo a process called DNA replication during S phase, where all the DNA is copied. And by the end of S phase, the cell has 2 copies of every piece of DNA. This is, as you can imagine, going to be very important for a cell that is going to divide into 2 cells because they both need all of the DNA. So during S phase, the cell is also still doing all this normal cell life stuff as well. So I guess you can draw a little arrow up to that as well, because all of this is also happening during S phase. The one addition is that the DNA is also being replicated. Okay, so at the end of S phase, the cell is going to be a little bit bigger, and it is going to have 2 copies of every chromosome. So if we look in the nucleus, which is, I guess, here, we would zoom in and see 2 copies of every, I'm just going to say every piece of DNA. Piece of DNA. Okay, and that would be happening in the nucleus. Okay, from there, we enter another G phase. This is called the G2 phase. And during G2 phase, this is another growth or gap phase. And all the same thing are happening. Whoop, so you can do another arrow over here. Oh, come on. All the same stuff is happening. Okay. I really want it to be a perfect arc, but Notability doesn't want to let me. Okay, that's fine. I relent. The cell is growing in size, and then it's also doing all the normal, oh, now you let me do it. All the normal cell life things. Metabolism, protein synthesis, membrane transport, everything a cell needs to do and stay alive. But as you know, as a cell continues to get bigger, the surface area to volume ratio continues to decrease until we reach a point where the cell is so big that if we get any bigger, our surface area to volume ratio is going to be too low, and diffusion isn't going to be able to happen fast enough to reach the center of the cell. We're not going to be able to bring enough stuff in and out in order to support the cell. So the cell at the end of our G2 phase is going to need to divide. And so it enters mitosis and cytokinesis that I've kind of confusingly drawn here on the outside as pink dots. I'm not quite sure why. Okay, so mitosis and cytokinesis, which is the same thing here. Maybe this should be, sorry guys. Oh, you're going to be upset. I'm going to change this to blue. Okay, mitosis and cytokinesis both together combine to form cell division. So mitosis plus cytokinesis is equal to cell division. Mitosis is responsible for the division of the chromosomes. So remember, back in S phase, we copied the DNA. So we had 2 copies of every piece of DNA. And in mitosis, we are going to divide up that DNA. So the 2 baby cells that come out of this, or the daughter cells, are going to all have the same DNA. And then cytokinesis, I forgot letters here, C-Y-T-O, cytokinesis, is dividing everything else. So things that also need to be divided are the cytoplasm and the organelles, including the cell membrane. Okay, so after the cell divides, we are left with 2 identical daughter cells. So these are called daughter cells. And they are genetically identical to one another. And these daughter cells can both go on and enter the G1 phase and then proceed to S and then to G2, and then they can divide again. You can see how we could increase the number of cells exponentially if the daughter cells keep dividing themselves. Sometimes cells exit the cell cycle. They stop growing and dividing, and they enter what's called the G0 phase or G0. And when they exit the cell cycle, they are no longer dividing. And as a result, they can't get too big. So this has to kind of stop. They're limited in their size, but they still keep doing all the normal cell life things. So if a cell continues in the cell cycle, it will keep undergoing G1, S phase, G2, and then it will divide, but it can enter the cell cycle and stop dividing, and we call that G0 or G0. Okay, that's all.